Asha had never imagined her life would come to this, a crumpled body on the side of a filthy, bustling alley, her legs twisted unnaturally beneath her. The sun blazed overhead, but her world was cloaked in darkness. Her breath came in shallow gasps, pain radiating from every limb, but it was the betrayal that hurt more than her broken bones. Just moments ago, her in-laws, those she had served with every ounce of her being, had shoved her out of a moving van and left her there. They didn't speak. They didn't look back. Their message was clear. She was no longer useful to them. The reason she had given birth to a daughter. She had prayed for years for a child, endured cruel words, midnight beatings, and endless accusations. And when her daughter came into the world, Asha had cried not from shame, but from joy. But to them, it was a disgrace. A girl, a burden, a disappointment. And now, discarded like trash on the side of the road, Asha tasted the bitter truth of their hatred. People walked past her, so many people. Shopkeepers, fruit vendors, children with balloons, men in office clothes. Some glanced at her with pity, others with disgust. But no one stopped. No one helped. The world kept spinning while she lay in the dirt, soaked in her own blood, fading. With each passing second, Asha tried to speak, but her voice cracked and vanished into the chaos. Her vision blurred. A tear slid down her temple, not from pain, but from the terrifying thought that she might die here, forgotten and unloved. Her baby's face flickered in her mind, the one she'd barely held. She didn't even know where they'd taken her. Just as her eyes began to close, a shadow loomed over her. A cane tapped gently against the pavement. Then, a pause. A man, older and limping slightly, bent down. His clothes were plain, his hair graying at the temples, but his eyes were kind. He didn't look away. He didn't hesitate. He knelt beside her, pulled a clean handkerchief from his pocket, and wiped the blood from her brow. I'm here, he said softly. You're safe now. Her lips quivered. She tried to speak, but only a whisper came out. Why are you helping me? The man, Daniel, looked at her, his face clouded with emotion. Because someone once helped me when I was drowning, and I promised I'd never walk past pain again. He didn't know her story. He didn't need to. Her eyes told him everything. With surprising strength for his age. He lifted her into his arms, shielding her from the curious stares of strangers. He carried her past honking rickshaws and weaving motorbikes, past indifferent faces, all the way to his modest apartment above a quiet corner bookstore. He didn't ask for anything in return. He just gave warm soup, clean clothes, a bed to rest in, and most of all, silence when she needed it, and kindness when she didn't know how to ask. Days passed. Then weeks. Her legs were mended by doctors he knew through a charity clinic. He brought books to her bedside, read her poetry when the nightmares woke her, and listened when the silence in her chest broke into sobs. He never rushed her healing. He just walked beside it. Slowly, Asha began to live again. In Daniel's gentle presence, she learned to trust, and in her daughter's memory, she found strength. One morning, she looked at him and said, I don't want to survive anymore. I want to stand. He smiled and held out his hand. Then let's begin. And together they did. Daniel walked slowly, his cane tapping against the uneven pavement with a soft, familiar rhythm. The sun was high, casting harsh shadows across the busy alleyway. He had passed this street countless times since his wife died 2 years ago, which time a little more hollow, a little more distant from the world around him. But today, something stopped him in his tracks. There, just ahead, a young woman lay slumped on the ground. Her clothes were torn, her face bruised, her legs twisted in a way that made him wince. People passed her like she was invisible. A few glanced her way, their expressions unreadable, but no one stopped. Not one. Daniel stood still, his hand tightening around the cane handle. For a moment he was somewhere else, his mind flooded with the memory of his late wife, Maya, lying in a hospital bed, her body failing quietly while the world outside carried on. She had suffered for years, battling illness in silence, swallowing pain with a smile. No one truly saw her, not even him, until it was too late. His breath caught. He took a hesitant step toward the girl. She's not your problem, whispered the voice of logic, of self-preservation. You don't know her story. You don't need this. But his heart, the part that still remembered Maya's trembling fingers clutching his in the final days, overpowered the voice. Daniel limped forward, eyes never leaving the woman on the ground. Her eyes fluttered open briefly, then shut again. She looked half-conscious, her lips parched and caked with dust. Without a word, he reached into the canvas bag hanging from his shoulder and pulled out a small plastic bottle of water. He unscrewed the cap, knelt beside her, ignoring the twinge in his knee, and gently pressed the bottle to her lips. She flinched. "It's okay," he said softly, his voice cracked with age, but steady with warmth. "You're safe now." Her eyes opened again, dark, confused, frightened, but she sipped the water. He watched her as she drank slowly, each swallow a defiance against whatever cruelty had brought her here. He could see it in her face, the pain, the humiliation, the overwhelming exhaustion of someone who had been betrayed by the very people meant to protect her. "I'm Daniel," he said quietly, still kneeling. "I don't know what happened to you, but I'm not going to leave you here." Usher tried to speak, but her voice caught. She looked at him like she wasn't sure if he was real. "You're not leaving," she whispered, barely audible. He shook his head gently. "No, you don't leave someone like this, not ever." That moment, small and fragile, cracked something open in both of them. For Daniel, it was the burden of guilt, years of watching pain and doing nothing. For Usher, it was the beginning of a truth she'd forgotten. Not everyone turns away, as people continued to pass. Glancing briefly before turning their heads, Daniel sat beside her on the sun-baked pavement, shielding her with his presence. He was just an old man with a limp and a cane, but in her eyes, at that moment, he was the only person in the world who saw her pain and chose to care. And for the first time in years, Usher believed she might be worth saving. The faint clinking of teacups filled the quiet room as Daniel moved slowly around the tiny kitchen. His home was simple, worn wooden floors, faded curtains, a threadbare rug by the sofa, but every corner radiated warmth. Usher sat in a wheelchair by the window, wrapped in a soft shawl Daniel had draped over her shoulders that morning. The smell of chamomile tea drifted through the air, calming and familiar. She watched him with a mixture of awe and disbelief. How could someone so kind still exist in a world that had treated her so cruelly? Her hands trembled in her lap, fingers nervously twisting the edge of the shawl. For weeks she had been silent, too afraid, too broken, too unsure of how to speak her truth. But today something shifted. Maybe it was the way Daniel hummed softly as he poured the tea, or how he always made sure the light from the window reached her chair, or maybe it was just time. "My husband died 2 years ago," Daniel had told her the first week, when she had asked why he lived alone. "Cancer took her slowly, hurt like hell." It was the only time she saw his hand shake. Today, as he handed her a cup, their fingers brushed. She looked up at him, and the words tumbled out before she could stop them. "They said, I failed them." Daniel paused. "I didn't give them a son, I gave them a beautiful daughter, but they said I was cursed." Her voice wavered, but she pushed on. "I cooked for them, I cleaned, I smiled when I was dying inside, and when they realized I wouldn't bring them a dowry, or a boy, they decided I wasn't worth keeping." Daniel sat down across from her, his face unreadable, but his eyes filled with something close to sorrow. "Not pity, never pity." She took a breath. "They beat me for months, but that last night they broke my legs, and then they just left me like I was trash." Silence settled between them. It was heavy, but not uncomfortable. Daniel nodded, slowly, letting the truth sink in without trying to fix it. "They broke your legs," he said, voice low, steady, "but not your will." Usher's lips quivered, and a tear slid down her cheek. She hadn't even realized she was crying. "You're still here. You still got up, maybe not on your feet yet, but you got up." He leaned forward, setting his cup aside. "You think you're weak because you cried, but weakness isn't tears. Weakness is walking away from someone who needs help. And that's not you, Usher. That's not who you are." She stared at him, heart pounding. No one had ever spoken to her like that, like she mattered, like she had strength inside her. "I can't walk," she whispered. He smiled gently. "Not yet." Over the weeks that followed, Daniel arranged therapy through a community health center. A wheelchair was donated by an organization he'd once volunteered for. Neighbors began stopping by with hot meals, books, and soft words, most of them inspired by Daniel's quiet insistence that kindness should ripple. Each day, Usher's body healed inch by inch. But more than that, her spirit did too. She laughed once when Daniel accidentally spilled tea and muttered under his breath. She cried when a nurse told her she had enough muscle strength to start physical therapy. And one evening, she stood just for a second, clinging to the edge of the table, but it felt like touching the sky. In Daniel's home, she wasn't broken, she wasn't cursed. She was becoming something she'd never dared believe she could be again. The garden outside the rehab center was quiet, kissed by the gentle warmth of the late morning sun. The scent of blooming marigolds floated in the air, and a soft breeze stirred the leaves, carrying with it a rare peace. Usha sat in her wheelchair on the stone path, eyes fixed on the small distance ahead, just 5 steps. To anyone else, it would seem trivial, but to her it was a mountain. Daniel stood nearby, holding onto a pair of parallel bars that had been installed for her physical therapy. His face was calm, but his eyes carried the weight of every moment they had endured. Together, every tear, every ache, every small victory. Today was different. Today was the day she would try to stand on her own. Usha looked down at her legs, now braced with metal supports that clung tightly from calf to thigh. The pain hadn't gone away, it never fully did, but something else had grown stronger. Her will. She tightened her grip on the wheels of her chair and took a breath so deep it trembled. Daniel moved beside her without a word, just a steady hand on her shoulder. You ready? He asked, gently. No, she whispered. But I want to try. Daniel smiled. That's all you need. With a grunt of effort and a surge of courage, Usha pushed herself up. Her legs wobbled violently beneath her. The pain shot up her spine. Her breath caught in her throat, but she was upright. She was standing. The nurses watching from a distance froze. Daniel held out his hands, just in case, but didn't touch her. He knew she needed to do this on her own. Usha's knuckles turned white as she gripped the bars. The garden swayed around her. Her body screamed in protest, but she didn't sit back down. She shifted her right foot an inch forward, then the left. 1 step. A trembling, slow, clumsy step. A beat of silence and then applause. The nurses clapped softly, cheering her, on like they were witnessing a miracle. Tears slid down Daniel's cheeks as he stepped forward, voice thick. You stood up, he said, barely able to speak, for the girl they tried to silence. Usha's lips quivered into a shaky smile. It wasn't just walking, it wasn't just defying broken bones. It was something deeper, like digging her spirit out of the rubble and saying, I'm still here. I matter. You didn't destroy me. She took another step, and another. The garden blurred with her tears, but she didn't stop. Usha walked not far, not fast, but with each step, she reclaimed something they had tried to steal, her dignity, her voice, her power. And Daniel, the man with a cane and a broken heart, walked beside her, no longer just a helper, but her anchor. The auditorium was filled with quiet anticipation. Rows of chairs were occupied by women from all walks of life, some clutching their children, others sitting alone, their eyes shadowed with silent stories. Banners hung across the stage, reading voices rising, standing against abuse. The hum of whispered conversations faded as the host stepped aside and introduced the final speaker of the evening, Usha. She walked slowly onto the stage, supported by sleek braces beneath her long skirt. The spotlight hit her face, and for a moment, her breath caught. But then she saw Daniel in the front row, his cane resting against his chair, his eyes locked on her with unwavering pride. And just like that, her fear dissolved. She stood tall, behind the podium, her hands steady, her voice clear. My name is Usha, she began, her gaze sweeping across the room. And not long ago I was broken, I was discarded. I was told that my life, my voice didn't matter. A hush fell over the audience. I gave everything to a family who saw me as less than human. And when I didn't give them the son they wanted, they gave me pain, they gave me silence, they gave me the street. A woman in the crowd quietly wiped her cheek. I thought I was going to die there, alone, forgotten, but then, her voice softened, trembling just slightly. A stranger stopped. He didn't ask questions. He didn't look away. He saw me. Usha paused. She looked directly at Daniel. He smiled, eyes glassy. That man is sitting right there, she said, pointing gently. A widower who had no reason to help me, no obligation, no connection, but he chose kindness. Applause rippled through the hall, and because of him, I learned to walk again, not just with my legs, but with my spirit. I learned that survival is not weakness, that scars are not shame, and that being a woman, being a mother is never a curse. A quiet yes rang out from the back of the room. Usha's voice grew stronger, her posture firmer. I stand here today, not just for myself. I stand for every woman who was silenced, every girl who was made to feel invisible, every soul who thought pain was their destiny. Asterisk tears were no longer hidden in the crowd, they flowed freely, cleansing years of quiet suffering. Asterisk, I was saved by one act of compassion, she said, her voice steady now, and I promise I will spend the rest of my life making sure no woman around me ever feels unseen again. Asterisk, a long roaring applause exploded across the room. Women stood, some cried, some clapped through sobs. Asterisk and Daniel, in the front row, wiped his tears, knowing deep in his heart that this moment was worth everything. Asterisk, one act of kindness had lit a fire. Asterisk and Asha had become its flame. Asterisk,